How's it going, everyone? It's Harvey from Weather Sponge 5000, and in this video we're going to focus on the Atlantic hurricane season, more specifically a tropical wave that's coming off the West African coast that now has a higher possibility of developing into Tropical Storm Danielle very soon. But before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather-related content. So if we were to take a look at the latest run of the GFS model as of the 0Z run, we do see that now the GFS model is not only developing a tropical storm, but it's developing quite a formidable tropical storm with its millibar pressure almost down to low 990s. So it is a quite I wouldn't say a very powerful tropical storm, but it is definitely strong enough to be more than just a weak tropical storm. So we're just talking about potentially a mid-level to maybe high-end tropical storm we're seeing right here by around the 5 to 6 day mark, right in the middle of the main development region. Now, this has been a big update because, of course, over the past several weeks, it's been very quiet in the main development region, but now we're seeing the GFS model wanting to develop a tropical storm in the main development region, and it's gonna go further westward to where potentially maybe the Caribbean could get involved. We have to wait and see how the forecast unfolds over the next several days. But if we were to take a look at the European model as well, the European model is also agreeing on the fact that there will be a tropical storm by next week in the main development region, which shows that now there's a lot higher certainty, or at least the chance is a lot more likely that we will see Tropical Storm Danielle in the main development region. But there's still several uncertainties we need to take a look at before we could really jump to that conclusion. If we were to take a look at the 12Z run of the European model, you see that the European model is also developing somewhat of a weaker tropical storm in the main development region, and we do see that small center circulation, and we do see convection on all sides of this low pressure system, which shows that this is a fairly well organized, or at least it's structured enough to where this could strengthen into tropical storm as it moves westward. But we need to take a look at several different factors before we can jump to that conclusion that this could develop into tropical storm Danielle. One thing we're going to need to take a look at is, of course, the relative humidity in the mid levels of the atmosphere, because if we were to take a look at that, of course, over the past several weeks, it's been very dry in the main development region, which has been preventing tropical cyclogenesis from occurring in the main development region. But that's expected to change head into later this weekend and into early next week, where we do see a plume of moisture move into the main development region. Now, this area right here will be the tropical wave that would develop into tropical storm Danielle if it were to develop. So if I were to continue to move forward, we see a plume of moisture move into the main development region, and that moistens up the atmosphere enough surrounding this tropical wave to where it will be able to fend off a lot of the dry air. And we do see that just to the northeast of this plume of moisture, while there is dry air, it's nowhere near the amount we've been seeing over the past several weeks, or even as dry as the air we're seeing just to the northwest of this plume of moisture. As you see that there isn't a ton of stable air that's really gonna entrain or inhibit this area of convection from potentially developing into a tropical storm. And if I were to continue to move forward, while yes, the dry air does exist, and in fact it does entrain the storm a little bit on the western side, we still do see that there's a high level of moisture on the northwestern side of this low pressure system. I mean, the northeastern side of this low pressure system, which shows that while there is dry air, there is at least enough moisture around center circulation where it's able to strengthen despite the existence of dry air. Of course, there's still a high amount of uncertainty regarding how much dry air there will be. It's very difficult to really forecast the strength of tropical cyclones, because it really depends on a bunch of factors that really are difficult to measure. such as the amount of stability in the atmosphere as well as the amount of wind shear, because of course any minuscule changes could make a big difference in terms of the amount of upper level winds this low pressure system experiences. But with both of the main computer models wanting to develop a tropical storm, it's definitely more likely that we could see a tropical storm in the main developed region. I'd say potentially a moderate chance beyond the 5-day mark. But again, the dry air will be an important factor. We need to see how much there will be. As of right now, the dry air is dominating the main developed region. We're going to need to wait and see how much moisture moves into comes off the West African coast before we could get a little bit of a better forecast regarding the strength and the amount of convection that will surround this low pressure system as it moves westward. So we're just going to have to wait and see regarding the amount of moisture that comes off the coast. But another thing we're going to need to pay close attention to is the amount of wind shear, because the wind shear will also be another difficult difficult thing to forecast over the next several days, because we do see that this low pressure system will be in an area where the wind shear will be relatively light. However, just to the north of it, we do have this upper level trough that's bringing strong upper level winds for a lot of northern Atlantic, including the areas north of this low pressure system. And of course, just to the south of it, we do have a little bit of an upper level high over this low and an upper level low that's right around the equatorial region that's bringing strong upper level winds on the southern side. But we do see that in this narrow area where the wind shear is very light, the low pressure system is developing. So the wind shear is expected to be relatively light to begin with, but as it continues to move westward, we do see the wind shear increase just a little bit. And another thing we're going to need to pay close attention to, by the way, is the track forecast, which I'll get to in just a sec. But we do see that the amount of wind shear just to the north of this low pressure system is quite strong, and we're really going to need to pay close attention to how this storm maneuvers and how this these upper level troughs just to the north of it move, because that will determine the amount of upper level winds and the amount of organization this low pressure system will deal with over the next several days. But at this point, it seems there's a moderate chance we will see a tropical storm in the main development region by next week, and we should see potentially this low pressure system develop potentially as early as Wednesday or Thursday, based on what the GFS model is forecasting. Taking a look at what the European model is stating when it comes to wind shear, taking a look at the 12Z run, so we could go a little bit beyond the 96-hour mark. We do see that the European model is expecting this low pressure system to stay within that, at least begin to stay in that area where the wind shear is very light, but it will move northward, which is why the European model isn't so lenient as strengthening any more than potentially just a weak tropical storm, because we do see that it's going to move straight into the stronger than usual wind shear from the induced by the upper level troughs that are just so north of it. So we're just going to need to wait and see how much wind shear there is. But at this point, I could confidently say that at least in the beginning, the wind shear will be very light. So it's likely that we will at least see an organized low pressure system. We're just it's a little bit more uncertain whether or not we're going to see a tropical storm, but I'd say there's a moderate chance at this time by next week we could see Tropical Storm Danielle. So that's something to pay very close attention to. Now, in terms of the track forecast, which is also a very important factor, because we want to see if this potentially could impact land in the future or potentially the United States. So if we were to take a look at what the GFS model is stating first, so as of the 0Z run, there has been a pretty major update, and it could almost be considered good news, where the GFS model as of the 0Z run wants to take this storm well further northward than the Caribbean islands, which is a stark contrast from the 18Z run, where the GFS model wanted to take it towards the Caribbean islands, which could have been a concern for Puerto Rico and surrounding islands just to the east of it. But it seems like the GFS model is now leaning more towards the northern track. But you still need to take this with a huge grain of salt because a track forecast, of course, could change drastically within the next couple days. So what's expected is that there's going to be a ridge just to the north of it that's going to steer it westward. However, there is a weakness in ridging right in the middle of the Atlantic at this time period. So this storm is gonna want to move to where that weakness in ridging exists, or where that troughing exists, to where it'll move a little bit further northward. And at this point, it seems like the GFS model is expecting weaker ridging than the 18Z run, which is why this low pressure system wants to move northward a lot quicker and earlier before reaching the Caribbean islands when it comes to longitude. So that would certainly be good news, because of course there comes a point where if a storm moves too far north, then it's unlikely that it's going to move all the way west without getting deterred by a jet stream dip or the westerly winds of the northern Atlantic. There definitely are exceptions, like the big one is Hurricane Florence, which pretty much was very far north, but still made its trek all the way to making landfall right around North Carolina. So there are the exceptions certainly, but a lot less likely we would see a tropical cyclone make the trek all the way westward by when it's this far north in the Atlantic. But there's still a high amount of uncertainty. We don't even know if this track will stay the same, because the computer models could easily detect a little bit more ridging that would steer the storm further southward. There's a lot that could change within the next couple of days. What really will be the big determinant is how much ridging there will be. If there's a little bit more ridging just to the north of it, then of course this will take this further southward track. But if the troughing ends up winning out, then this will take a more northward track. And if I were to continue to move all the way forward, we do see that it comes fairly close to Bermuda, which would be a concern. And it does strengthen a bit, getting close to the United States coast, but not really making landfall. But highly uncertain at this point. I'm going well beyond the where the forecast becomes certain, but we're just going to need to pay close attention to ridging over the next several days to really determine if this will move south or northward. So, and in terms of what the European model is stating at this time, we do see that the European model it is also sort of taking the northern track. You don't necessarily wait. Let me show you guys the 12Z run. If I were to show you guys, we do see the European model also wants to take northern track as a result of a lack of ridging and a little bit more troughing in the middle of the Atlantic. So that will be a key determinant in terms of where exactly potential Tropical Storm Danielle will go. So still a high amount of uncertainty regarding that. And in terms of where our tropical wave is, it's located right here, this area of thunder showers. Let me show you guys the forecasted loop. You see that there is some thunderstorm activity, not a ton, but eventually as it moves into Africa, off the coast of Africa, it will gain a little bit more convection and organization as a result of the light wind shear and the sort of lack of dry air that's going to surround it initially. So we should see it strengthen once it enters the Atlantic. Now, another thing we're going to need to pay close attention to is the sea surface temperatures, because if this moves a little bit further northward, then it's less likely to strengthen as strong if it were to take a northern track earlier, because at that point it would enter sea surface temperatures where the temperatures are more in the upper 70s rather than the minimum 80-degree threshold needed for tropical cyclone development. So as a result, it wouldn't strengthen as fast, but it also goes back to the track forecast, because we don't know if it's going to turn north this early or stay a little bit southward before maybe turning northward. So still another thing we're going to need to pay close attention to as this heads further westward. Now, taking a look at the 5-day graphical tropical weather outlook, while the National Hurricane Center isn't necessarily stating that any tropical cyclones will develop over the next 5 days, still take it with a big grain of salt, because of course the time when the GFS and the European model are developing this tropical storm are pretty much right around the 5-day mark. So I assume that within potentially as early as today or later today or into tomorrow, we could see that change where the National Hurricane Center does predict that there is a possibility of a tropical cyclone developing based on the latest GFS and European models. So while it's not while National Hurricane Center isn't expecting tropical cyclones right now, I do expect that to change in the very, very near future. Now, I'm taking a look at what the ensemble members are stating at this time. I'm taking a look at that. We do see that the GFS, a lot of the ensemble members are strengthening this to at least tropical storm status, which does raise the certainty that a tropical storm will form in the main developed region. And we do see a decent amount of them still want to take it southward close to the Caribbean. So just because the current forecast based on the European model and GFS model is saying more northward track does not mean that completely rules out of the Caribbean from experiencing direct impacts, because that's still certainly in the realm of possibilities. We're just going to need to wait and see over the next several days how the ridging builds in the northern Atlantic. So make sure to pay close attention to that. Now, here's my forecast regarding where potential tropical storm Danielle will move. I expect it to move a little west-northwest, where it could come close to the Caribbean. Caribbean needs to pay close attention to this. Both the GFS model and the European models are both developing tropical storm Danielle, so it is definitely more likely that we could see it by next week. So there's definitely something to keep in mind now that we could see our first tropical cyclone in, I think, almost a month now, which is pretty insane. So definitely something to pay close attention to right around the Caribbean, as there is that potential for tropical storm Danielle. But anyways, guys, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more about the content, and I hope you guys have a great day.